Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel. Texas Relays finishing up behind us. Longhorns City Limits recruiting weekend is done behind us at the Moncrief Complex. Spring practice in the books on Saturday. Busy day on the 40 acres. CJ, let's start with Nicholas Robertson, the newest member of the 2026 Texas recruiting class, commits as he's leaving campus. You got a chance to chop it up with him really quick before he made that trip back to Houston, talking to the Klein Bearcat. Why did he decide now was the time to pull the trigger?
Yeah, he said, look, it's all about Kyle Flood, his development, his relationship, the way that he goes about carrying himself, and obviously getting to see him in a spring practice environment again just kind of wrapped it up. It kind of put the bow on why Texas was the choice for him, his relationship, Kyle Flood. That was the key, the big winner there. And he said, look, Coach Flood called him into the office and he said, what's the deal? Are you gonna pull the trigger? Where are we standing right now? And he said, all right, we're making the decision official. We're going to commit. And he said Coach Flood was jumping for joy in his room. I don't know if I've ever seen that from him.
No, so you look at the 2026 O-line class, you got Nicholas Robertson committed. You got Max Wright, the offensive tackle, out of Melissa, committed. We'll see how many they end up taking, CJ, but this clearly could be a cycle where Texas reloads and remakes the offensive line. We talked about the out-of-state guys, the in-state guys. This could be a lot like 2022, where it's a year where Kyle Flood completely remakes the future of this program with an O-line class.
It's certainly looking like it with this start. You know, if Max Wright is your first commit and you're still looking at a healthy class with a number of 5-stars available, hey, that's a great start. So I'm all for it. Of course, we talk about Felix Ojo, John Turntime, Rosenborough, Utu as well. That's a heck of a group just in consideration. But now that you have a really solid projection at tackle and guard with the addition of Nicholas Robertson, really solid group.
You mentioned him, and we talk about him all the time when we talk about out-of-state offensive linemen. We talk about Samuel Roseborough out of Florida, Sam Utu out of Orange Lutheran in California. Really, really good offensive line crop, CJ. So we'll see how that evolves. But let's stay in the state of California. Mark Bowman, the 5-star tight end out of Mater Dei, wrapped up a visit. If you go to CJ's Twitter, there's a picture of Brendan Baker and Mark Bowman standing outside the Moncrief Complex. Those guys were teammates at Mater Dei. CJ, everybody's got their opinions on where this recruitment stands, right? Is it Texas and Georgia? Is it Texas and Oregon? Is it Texas, Oregon, and USC? I guess if you're a Texas fan, the one thing you can find solace in at this point is that no matter how you slice it, Texas has kind of been the one constant that's been in this recruitment.
Yeah, Texas has seen recruitments like this, whether it just be, a Jamie French from last year. Is it Texas versus Florida State, Texas versus Tennessee, Texas versus LSU? Well, to your point, Texas is the team that is in that conversation for Mark Bowman to return to campus. With both parents, by the way, that's a big win for the Longhorns early in this recruitment. Of course, Ohio State was a school that he said he's going to get back up to and visit this spring. But right now, Texas is giving him a lot to think about. He was really complimentary about how he got to see the Texas Longhorns use their tight ends, Jordan Washington and Spencer Shannon, in practice this morning. So a lot to think about right now. And to your point, Texas being that one constant in his recruitment, that's a great sign moving forward.
No doubt, and we know how important tight end is. We actually saw Nick Townsend today. He was on campus for practice. He'll be back for another practice. His mom was even saying, hey, he wants to get to know the playbook a little bit better, because I think it's pretty clear once he gets here June 1st, the expectation is going to be to give this offense
He's got to go quick.
Yeah, it's going to be a quick learning curve, but in 2025, Nick Townsend is going to be counted on to play snaps. But in that 2026 class, tight end has got to be near, if not at the top of C. Sarkisian's needs, especially now that you got Dia Bell in the class. You don't have to worry about quarterback. Tight end's so important to this offense, CJ. Caden Prothrow was on campus today. They've got a few other tight ends that they're looking at, but without question, I think for all those programs we mentioned, Georgia, USC, Oregon, Texas, not alone, Mark Bowman's their guy in 2026 at tight end.
Yeah, it feels like that. And, of course, Caden Prothrow was on campus. They left around the same time, so they actually were the final two to leave campus. A little nugget there. Jeff Banks walked the two of them out. They both headed out to the airport right after. But it's going to be interesting, right, because Georgia's making headwaves with Caden Prothrow. What does that mean down the road for an Ohio State, for a USC? Those are two West Coast guys. Nevada. I'm throwing Nevada in there, but for Texas to have both on campus today, it says that, hey, we've seen quarterback go big game hunting. We've seen offensive line go big game hunting. Last year was wide receiver. You liked your tight end haul last year as well. Now it's time to go land one of those 5-star big names in 2026.
Yeah, before we talk about some of the practice news notes and nuggets that we heard coming out of today, we talk about 2026 being a really good year for offensive linemen.
Yeah.
Kyle Flood may want to hold back a spot or two, because the 2027 O-line class, CJ, A lot of really good-looking prospects. Caden Scott's a really good-looking tackle prospect, 6'6", 290-plus out of San Antonio Roosevelt. Demarion Johnson out of Tyler Legacy's a guy we talked a lot about. So a lot of big-time O-line prospects in that 2027 class. That really was kind of the theme of the visit day. You always wonder, hey, which positions are going to be featured? 2027 O-line was really featured today. So Kyle Flood got some quality time with some big-time prospects in that rising junior class.
He's done this a few times now, Kyle Flood has, where he kind of says a visit in spring is just going to be mine, and he had it last year, and it was Brett Collegier came in, Turntine, some of these 2026s now, he's doing it for 2027 today. So I'll tell you what, Caden Scott out of San Antonio Roosevelt, that's what a five-star offensive lineman looks like. He said he was 6'6" and a half, essentially, 292 pounds. But my goodness, Jeff, I think we saw him walk in, we looked at each other and said, that's a good-looking prospect right there.
On the hoof, that's how you want your offensive tackle prospects to look, no doubt. One guy, though, that Mark Orphe and Chris Gilbert of late have been recruiting really hard, Jaquan Snell out of Waxahachie. Is he going to be a safety? Is he going to be a corner? I think they're just recruiting him as a defensive back right now, but it's pretty clear that Mark Orphe now is the secondary coach. Yeah. He's going to be a priority for Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at Jaquan Snell, you look at his physical attributes, and then you turn the tape on, you say, that guy looks like Jelani McDonald. Yeah. So whether it's corner, whether it's nickel, whether it's safety, that's a versatile football player, about 6'3", probably around 190 at the moment, but a lot of room to fill out. He's got some broad shoulders and a wingspan that probably stretches from the ends of Texas, essentially.
Exactly.
A good-looking prospect. Yes, Texas now in communication. Once again, he said Mark Orphe was going to be the guy that was constantly talking to him, which is a great sign for Texas there. But he will be back April 12th as well.
Yeah, a lot of these guys will be back April 12th. A lot of guys mentioned they've got visits coming up to Oklahoma, Texas A&M. So it's getting to that time of year where the 2026 boards, the 2027 boards, for a lot of these schools are already starting to crystallize. The process just starts earlier and earlier. CJ, before we get into what we heard at practice today, again, we'll get to those practice nuggets here in a second, but a lot of this information we'll talk about and plenty more is available at ontexasfootball.com. Get over to the site right now. Use the promo code OTFOG. That'll get you $49.95 for 1 year of access to ontexasfootball.com. So again, OTFOG is the promo code that you want to use over at ontexasfootball.com. CJ, let's start with, for me, the big takeaway from spring practice, from what we heard. And I only say this is because I said going into spring, look, if the Parker Livingstone hype, if it's anywhere close to what it's been, then Texas might really have something. That was one of the first names we heard about when we started hearing about practice nuggets today.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been what we've heard for the last three practices, right? Since spring ball began, Parker Livingstone, it's a constant name. And I don't know, what that wide receiving rotation might look like, but I know Parker Livingstone is going to be a part of it. He's getting right there with Ryan Wingo in terms of starters for this group with no DeAndre Moore. I don't think there's anybody else in that conversation at the moment. Of course, waiting to hear and see the development of some of the youngsters. Will Aaron Butler make that jump? We'll have to wait and see. But right now, it's Parker Livingstone, it's Ryan Wingo. Those are the two that we're hearing a lot about. I was told, Jeff, almost, I don't want to say the U word, but he was close to unguardable today.
When you look at those young guys, a guy that I was encouraged about, I don't think I gave him enough love from our initial practice reports, but a guy that I was really encouraged about after watching him on Tuesday on their first practice. I kind of like what Jamie French showed.
Yeah, I do too.
Just he had running some in-breaking routes, some crossers, catching balls from Arch Manning. So just in terms of natural feel for the position, I think he might be a little further ahead of Khalil Lockett right now. That's not to say anything bad about Khalil Lockett. I just think that's just my opinion of where Jamie French is right now. But that's a really good receiver group. They're going to get a chance to grow over these practices leading up to the end of spring and then going into the summer conditioning. Do you have something else, CJ?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't want to say he's the forgotten guy of the group, but Dalen McCutcheon getting some first-team run, obviously with no DeAndre Moore in the mix. So to get that playbook learned, to get some snaps with Arch Manning, that's going to pay off in the long run for Dalen McCutcheon, who I'm sure you noticed it as well. That as smooth of a route runner as any wide receiver on campus today.
Yeah, and we'd heard that even when the freshmen got to campus, that maybe just in terms of a technician at the position, he was going to probably be the furthest ahead of those other guys, maybe from that standpoint ready to go. But again, I like what I see from Jamie French, and you just watch Khalil Lockett move around. You're
Yeah.
like, okay, once he figures it out, he's going to be fine. So really like where this freshman group of wide receivers are. And then the young guys, too, that were here last year, Parker Livingstone, obviously, the head of that group. We know Freddie DeBose, we reported earlier this week, no longer with the program. So that class is down one receiver. But, again, the Parker Livingstone hype, it continues to look like it's real. CJ, let's go over to defense real quick. And the other big takeaway for me, and we've talked about this at OTF, Trey Moore looking more and more like he may be spending most of his time at off-ball linebacker.
Right.
I think when you look at the edge group, I think that kind of goes into some of those conversations we've had. How are you going to get Colin Simmons the snaps he needs and Ethan Burke the snaps he needs, and how does Colton Vosick figure in, and Lance Jackson and Zeno Mazulau, how the younger guys, how do they factor in? Well, one way is probably to move Trey Moore position, so at least that's what we're hearing. It sounds like he's at least working more as an off-ball linebacker.
Yeah, we did hear that today, and I don't want to say completely surprised because we had been talking about this as a possibility earlier in the offseason. But you look at his final 7 games off the edge, and you say, yeah, 7 sacks, a few forced fumbles, a couple fumble recoveries. The man lived in the backfield that second half of the season. I'm not to say that he's never going to see the edge again, Jeff, but it's going to be really interesting to see how they use him as an off-ball linebacker in the middle of the field. Of course, we've seen Anthony Hill do it. They brought in Brad Spence to do very much the same. What does that look like for Trey Moore? All I know is you could possibly see a front 7 with Ethan Burke, Colin Simmons, Colton Vosick, you name them, and then Brad Spence, Trey Moore, and Anthony Hill. That's a heck of a front 7 there.
Yeah, you've got plenty of sub-package options. We talked about it for PK. The options for your third down packages especially could be limitless depending on what personnel. And I just think this is another good way. Hey, how do you get your best 11 on the field? Move Trey Moore back to the second level. And, I think one way to think about it is not while he was at Texas, but you look at Brian Arakpo and even Alex Okafor to an extent. When those guys went to the NFL, Brian Arakpo was drafted and, Washington moved him to Sam linebacker.
Right.
I said, well, how are you going to move him to off-ball linebacker? Well, based on the way their defense functioned at the time, he was perfect for that Sam linebacker position. So Texas really hasn't used that third linebacker in their 40 personnel a ton. But you're going to face some teams, maybe an SEC play where you can do that, number one. And number two, again, like I said, it's a way to get your best 11 on the field, to have Trey Moore on the field. And plus, hey, if your 3 linebackers are Trey Moore, Anthony Hill, and let's say Ty Anthony Smith, well, yeah, you can pull the nickel off in that case because Ty Anthony Smith can function like a dime linebacker. Right. So, again, so many options for Pete Kwiatkowski. Flip it back over to offense, CJ. The offensive line, Bobby and Rod and I talked about this on the live stream on Friday. It sounds like DJ Campbell and Cole Hudson are really taking on that leadership role seriously on the offensive line. We heard 2 names on the offensive line today, or DJ Campbell or Trevor Gooseby, specifically 2 guys that stood out to some of the observers today.
I think Trevor Gooseby is going to be a name that any Texas observer watches, notices, and say, okay, I see what Texas sees and saw last year, right, to implement him as that emergency tackle when Cam Williams and Kelvin Banks went down. But that's a great time for DJ Campbell, of course, because coming back for year 4, right? I'm not sure if that was a part of his plan necessarily, but I do think, and he would probably agree to this, he probably needs this 4th year. So to hear his name early in spring as the one lone returner, great sign for the Longhorns and DJ Campbell specifically. But I want to mention, we saw Brandon Baker walking out Mark Bowman earlier today. That right tackle spot, I want to hear more from it. Is it Brandon Baker? Is it Andre Kojo? Both are getting some good looks right now, so we'll continue to keep you updated here on Texas Football.
I've officially slapped the label of that is my sneaky good position battle.
I like it.
Ball, right tackle.
Stamp it.
Because we've heard, really good things about Kojo too, and that's a guy that was really young when he got to campus. Not all that different from, he's kind of the offensive version of Moro Ojomo, a guy that you knew he was young when he got here. So hey, he's probably not going to give you anything for a couple of years, but once he's starting to figure it out, can he be a factor now? So Brandon Baker's the clubhouse leader at this point for right tackle, but that's not set in stone yet. That's in pencil, and Kyle Flood's got the eraser in hand if he needs it, if Kojo makes a big jump forward this spring. So definitely something to look at. CJ, first week of spring practice in the books. We talked about the 2 big unofficial visit weekends. This first one is in the books. So as Texas gets ready to turn the page into the month of April, how do you wrap up this weekend? Put a bow on this weekend for us.
Well, Texas earned a commitment, right? 4th one in the 2026 class. Starting to move that offensive line group along as well. And I think you're going to see a push in June saying, hey, we don't have time to wait anymore. You're either in or you're out. And Nick Robertson congratulations. He earned a spot in that class today. Also, we didn't mention Xavier Crowell, the talented running back out of Alabama who was on campus. He was getting the red carpet rolled out. He was golf carted to and fro campus all the way up to Denny's for the practice as well. Headed back right now, but that wraps up a 3-day trip to Austin. A great sign for the Longhorns. Alabama, Auburn. Getting him out of the state of Alabama is going to be a tough one. But Texas did a good job today in terms of showing them off the city, the campus, the university, etc. That's going to be one to monitor as well moving forward.
Yep. So stay locked in here on the channel. We'll have more on Xavier Crowell and all the 2026 recruiting battles. Obviously, get over to ontexasfootball.com. Again, the promo code OTFOG gets you 1 year of access on ontexasfootball.com for $49.95. And we'll have all the latest news, notes, and nuggets, not just on recruiting, but practice as we get them well reported. For CJ Vogel, I'm Jeff Howe. And until next time, hook 'em.